Very great and warm welcome from my side, from ESEIA and from TU Graz. I'm very happy to have you, and I'd like to also say that Andrea Höginger, the Vice Rector Research Center, apologies. The audience now tonight is about 70 registered participants from 11 countries in Europe, from 5 countries also in Africa, from Morocco, South Africa, Mozambique, Nigeria, and Cape Verde, and 1 country in Asia, namely from India. I'm really happy to welcome our speakers of this evening, Frans Coenen from the University of Utwente and Manuel Casquiço from Adene, and the chair, Günter Getzinger from TU Graz. I also have the pleasure to welcome Philippe Schill from the European Commission. The European Energy and Environmental Agency is present from Portugal, from Austria, from many other countries. Our business partners, I'd like to welcome, on behalf of the business partners, I'd like to welcome Walter Berger from voestalpine, Jürgen Bruckner from Fronius International, and a lot of warm welcome to our Initiate and Emerge project partners from ISTE, ICRI, and UMP, as well as to friends from partner organizations, research organizations, especially UNEM Research, Franz Brettenthaler, EIT, Bernadette Fina, and Instituto Superior de Engenharia de Lisboa. And I would also like to welcome our colleagues from the ESEIA member organizations, Helena Schneider from Energy Steiermark, our colleagues from Savonia University of Applied Sciences, also from Vilnius Tech, University of Twente, old-timers, also Martin Aronsen, I'd like to welcome here. And also from Adene, colleagues from LNEG, from the National Research Center in Portugal for Energy and Geology, also Moldovan Macedon from Brașov Technical University in Romania, and our colleagues from the University of Graz and from TU Graz. Many students are here. A warm welcome to you all. I see also that past rector Harald Kainz is among us. So thanks very much for attending this. Just a short word about why we do all this. The aim of the ESEIA lecture series is really to bring people together to talk about climate neutrality by 2050, what can be done, and especially regarding also the Clean Industrial Deal, which is our aim. We often don't have enough time to talk openly about scientifically informed solutions, and therefore ESEIA's lecture series is a good opportunity to offer an agora for ideas, an open dialogue twice a semester, and we have internationally renowned experts who join us for these really special occasions. And we also have societal representatives who also express their views and concerns. And this is the 13th lecture evening, and the topic of tonight is uptake of renewables in European local communities. And before I hand over to the chair, I'd like to say a few words about Günter Getzinger. He is the head of the STS, the Science, Technology and Society Unit at Graz University of Technology since 2018. And his research and teaching focuses on philosophy and ethics of science and technology, sustainable technology design and innovation, and energy transition. Before joining TU Graz, Günter worked for the University of Klagenfurt Faculty of Interdisciplinary Studies, and he's a co-founder of the Interdisciplinary Research Center for Technology, Work and Culture. But what qualifies Günter for the topic of this evening is even more, I think, is the fact that he has had an important career in politics. For a decade, he was a member of the Styrian Parliament, and he also served as a member of the City Council of Graz for the Austrian Social Democrats for many years. He was a spokesperson for science, culture, and environmental affairs. I'm very pleased to hand over to Professor Günter Getzinger. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brigitte. Well, I hope I'm qualified. I'm not sure about this. And the older I become, the more unclear is it to me if I understand anything. So I'm trying, as all these people from universities, they are trying to deliver, to try to understand. They seek some approaches to understand, for example, this hockey sticks we are observing with some graphs regarding renewables in Europe. So that makes us a little bit optimistic that there is an uptake with photovoltaics, there's an uptake with windmills all over Europe and also in other parts of the world. So now is the time to have a little bit a closer look to it from a social science point of view, for example, because regarding technologies, of course, it will be developed further. That's completely clear. Efficiency will be developed. Well, that's the way of technology, and that's their contribution. But now, and I'm very happy to have Frans Coenen with me as the main speaker this evening, because he is a social scientist. He looks from this perspective on the uptake of renewables, especially, and that I think that's needed, that in-depth analysis with communities on the community level, because this is a perspective quite fresh, I would say. There were mainly the big companies, electricity companies, which put some money into the development of renewables. But now, I don't know, since 5 or 7 years, it's a little bit different. So, Frans, I'm very, very much looking forward to your insights. What really on this community level happens? And there is a few people in Europe which are able to talk about this issue. And Frans is one of these people because he holds, for example, a master's degree in public administration, a PhD in environmental policy planning. This is a very suitable and smart background, I would say. And he's a researcher at University of Twente, a professor at CSTM. That's a unit there, an institute there, which focuses on exactly that issue of governance and technology of sustainability. He did a lot of research. He's quite a youngster, like me. I saw the year 1960 behind your name. And I know this year very well. So, just joking. Of course, he has a lot. He has done a lot of research in this regard, and I think we all are very much looking forward to your presentation. Frans, it's your turn.
First, unmute myself, and I'll go to share my presentation. Yeah, the year 1960. Yeah, if you're getting older, you also get a little bit more frustrated with your birthday year, because at my university, people are wearing sweaters, which actually says, like many universities have, says like University of Twente established 1961. And I tell my students, I don't like your sweater. It always makes me remind that I'm actually older than the university, which is a bit of a strange idea. Okay, I hope everybody can see my presentation. I think that will work. Okay, I hope I can start a bit of a discussion today. I didn't want to make kind of a social science presentation in a sense of bashing engineers or bringing a very different perspective. I try to keep this discussion a bit practical, and hopefully in a moment you will understand that although Günter said, yes, we see all over Europe, we see, of course, that we're all picking up much more renewables in our energy mix. There also are some things to worry about. And I'm from a country, the Netherlands, that has actually a reputation for picking up on renewables. And then I particularly talk about citizens and local communities relatively early on. And I want to introduce you to some problems that we have there. And what I'm going to try to do a little bit more practical is talk about barriers, because that's something that really interests me. Because what would I like to do in the remaining years of my career is actually addressing these barriers in the energy transition, because that's actually what we need to do. We're not passively going to wait what is going to happen in the market. We do want to think about new forms and new way forwards in the energy transition. I think that's also something on the agenda that every one of us here present can discuss with each other, because we're all citizens, we're all energy consumers, so we all should have an opinion about actually the uptake of renewables from the perspective of being an energy consumer. Now, first, I will say a little bit about the uptake of renewables, because it might otherwise be a bit confusing, and particularly because I'm narrowing down a little bit. And like I already said, I want to take the perspective a little bit of the lessons of a relatively successful country. And you see already there the question mark, so you understand that I will say a little bit about that. And then what I decided to do is from some recent projects that we did, that I want to zoom in on some more examples to understand the barriers. Because I think if you want to understand really what is difficult to get started with renewable energy on the local level, in local communities and on the level of citizens, you have to actually zoom in on some cases and go over the barriers, and it gets much more clear which we actually are struggling with. And then in the end, I will try to say something about solutions and approaches. But my main goal is actually go over with you with the barriers, and I think it will get it will give some discussion, and Manuel will also address some of these things in his part of the lecture. So let's go on with this. This is not such a nice slide, I'll be honest to that. Students would immediately complain about it, but I needed this to make a point. So I think we're all aware what an energy system actually is. And I always struggle with the problem as a social scientist that many natural scientists and new scientists think very much about systems as something that comes from engineering, and it's about production and conversion and delivery and use of energy as a kind of a technical process with flow of energy, which is quite okay if you would like to look at a local energy system like that. But let's not forget why we actually are producing energy. We're producing energy for human beings. We actually produce energy, we use energy, we supply energy to eventually supply energy service to end users. Yeah. Now, end users that we're going to discuss today are mostly citizens and local consumers, and not so much there's some industry on board here. They might have another opinion about it, but in the end, it's about energy service that are the tasks where we utilize energy. So to keep it simple, on the local level, everybody is sitting now at home. So we talk about space heating, you talk about domestic water heating, you talk about cooking your food, it's about lighting, all the things that we actually do with energy. So that's actually very, very important. Now, so if we think about renewables, what renewables actually mean for people is that at the moment, people, of course, get their energy services provided on the basis of very different forms of energy. I will present you a case from India later on quickly, and that you actually realize that you can have the same energy service like light based on very different sources of energy. And of course, this always goes through an energy system. And of course, we are looking for energy systems that also are as climate neutral as possible. So we do not have green gas emissions, and so there are different type of end use devices. But I make a little bit of a difference here between, like, say, the energy service and the end user devices. But it's not so super important, of course. But we have renewables energy systems that we actually use to capture and convert energy from natural resources. And we don't want to create harmful green gases. Now, we're not going to go into nuclear or things like that, but interesting then, of course, is that we do have energy services that are based on renewable energy, and we would like more people in Europe to actually prefer that and take that up. And both system changes, both towards different type of energy systems that actually use more greenhouse free emissions, and of course the energy services based on renewables, both actually can be measured in terms of a final renewable energy consumption. And that's actually what we are striving for in Europe, to actually raise the final renewable energy consumption. Okay, now the topic is wider uptake of renewables in the local communities. Now, that's always a bit of a misunderstanding, because at the moment in Europe, when I say local communities, everybody says, oh yeah, that is local energy communities. Yes and no. Communities have a different meaning. Many people, when they think about a community, they simply think about a geographical location where people are living with each other, where people are working with each other. I'll get back to that in a moment. And that's actually more of the perspective I'm going to take here. Although I'm going to make the arguments, and also Manuel is going to make the arguments, how important actually the more formalized forms of local communities are that organize themselves in organizing their local energy system. So wider uptake, also we can interpret this a little bit differently. I'll skip this a bit quickly, but you can think about this renewable energy systems that actually make use of renewable energy, and you can see there is a market for that. There are alternative ways, alternative systems, and of course there's a clean tech market where Europe is actually making a lot of progress. At the moment, of course, a lot of our clean tech is coming from China, but still it's a market. And the other perspective, of course, is the use of renewables for the energy services, which is also a matter of the energy markets. So these are the renewable sources more in the energy mix. And we could talk a little bit more about the market share of these renewable energy systems. We could talk about the market penetration of renewable energy systems. But I want to try to focus a little bit more on this perspective of what is happening on this local level. Now, why should we be interested in the local level? Now, that's an advantage when you're an old man. You still remember things that happened in the past. And some of you might remember 1992, Agenda 21, start of a lot of discussion on sustainability in the world. And already there, the argument was made that the local level is very important for sustainable development and sustainable development change. And it also holds, of course, then for renewable energy. And why? Because very simple, a lot of the energy is consumed on the local level. So it makes it a very important level to look at in the energy transition. It also, of course, has become a very important level because of the decentralization that we have now in our energy systems, due to the character of renewables, but also because Europe then, because we have decentralized energy systems compared with the more centralized fossil fuel systems, that we're working with local energy systems with distributed energy and decentralization. It also makes gives us a situation with a new role for us as citizens and us as energy consumers. We want to have a new and active role. And since years, of course, about 10 years, Europe is actually gambling on that, saying we should make the local level and the consumers and the energy citizens, we should make them more important, because they are a key factor in taking up the renewable energy transition. And in that sense is what we call community energy. So communities working with energy, communities work with energy projects. You can also see this as a way to solve the problems in the energy transition. Now, some of you might say, yeah, but you could also have a centralized generated renewable energy. Of course, that depends on the country, depends if you have centralized forms of renewable energy like hydropower. Okay, we could also discuss that, but let's take it from a bit of a different perspective. Now, let me get back to this local community. Now, everybody has a feeling for what a local community is, because you're all part of some form of a local community. Might be a village, might be a neighborhood, might be a city, might even be a virtual community, but communities can actually be defined as a groups of people that are interacting with each other in a shared location. And this is more like a sociological definition, and not just a geographical location or an administrative unit. And I always find out, if I try to do comparative work with people from other countries, there is different understanding actually in what local communities are. And also that we get a bit of confusion what we're talking about. So some people might think, when they think about community, they immediately think about municipal administrative units. Some other people with communities, they would really think about, yeah, these are villages. Other people would really think, if they think about communities, they really think more about this sociologically defined group of people that are interacting with each other, have a shared interest in something. And now in Europe, of course, we had, that started a little bit more from the UK, we had this concept of community energy. So these are energy projects that are owned, controlled, or at least benefit local communities. And that was there, of course, before the European Union developed the concept of renewable energy communities. Now, everybody probably heard about it. It's a legal entity. Depends a bit on which of the laws you look into. But what Europe wanted, that we would form energy communities as more legal entities. And this idea was very much shaped and inspired by cooperatives. Now, cooperative thinking, of course, has been there for quite some time. But the idea, of course, that in Europe, in accordance with the applicable national laws, we try to develop local energy communities that have voluntary participation, are autonomously, so not part of a municipality or part of a company, and that they are effectively controlled by the shareholders and the members. With the idea, of course, that this would also give a democratic boost to the whole energy transition. That's for one. And it would also mean that we as citizens and energy consumers, we would take a larger responsibility for the energy transition. And but both definitions, if you think about community energy projects, or you think about the more formalized EU renewable energy communities, they're all actually based in the end on the sociological concept of community. Even if it's a virtual community, it's still this idea of a community. Without some community ties, it will be very difficult to make a community that actually is a democratically controlled community. Now, let's make it a little bit more practical. My street, yeah? Now, if I look out of the window, I see approximately this. This is not about climate change, because what you see actually to the right side is water. When it was taken in 2019, actually this water is there because we put the water in November and hope it starts freezing, and then we skate in front of my house. It happened in 1996 when I bought the house. We had 3 weeks of skating. This winter, no skating at all. But this says something about climate change, of course. But it's not the thing that I want to show. And it's very difficult to see, of course, on this picture. But if you would really zoom in, you would see the difference between 2019 and if I would have a picture from 2023, because it is, I didn't have something different in Google Maps yet, you would see the solar panels on the roof. You would see people having heat pumps. You would see some of my neighbors actually having EV cars. Yeah. And it's amazingly how quickly this transition actually went. So we should, and Günter said it already at the beginning a little bit, actually should be getting very enthusiastic about it, the things moving so quickly. And the Dutch are really being seen as a relatively success case. And that's the start a little bit of my discussion. Because if we look in 2023, the installed capacity of solar panels in households in the Netherlands have increased 40 times compared to 2013. Yeah, which means that if you look at the success of citizens generating their own renewable energy on the houses with PV panels, about 25% of the people have this already on their house. And of course, that's mostly house owners. That's quite a high percentage, and we've been seeing as a kind of success country in that perspective. Also, the number of people that are having heat pumps is quickly growing because we have a natural gas phase out in the Netherlands. That's about 6%. And but what is also very spectacular in the Netherlands, 80% of the people say they have a green electricity contract. That doesn't mean, of course, that they actually have green electricity. Of course, that's all based on the certificates of origin. But the Netherlands seems to be still very popular to have a contract which says that you have green electricity. Now, and I always tell my students, it's great to have green electricity, but you can watch Champions League and the color of grass won't change because you have a green electricity. It's, of course, it's all virtual green electricity. So a relatively success case in the Netherlands. Let's start from that when we start discussing the uptake of renewables in local communities and by energy consumers and citizens. Because we're now running into some problems in the Netherlands. And it's spreading over Europe. And we have to discuss, if we discuss the barriers, we really have to address the problems that we have there. Now, for instance, a recent survey revealed that 60% of the Dutch people that have an electrical car intend to phase out their cars by 2030. Why? Because buying an electrical car was tax-wise very wise and very interesting, but they are losing this. So they would want to get rid of their car because the loss of tax benefits. Oh my God, this is actually something that's really worrying. With the selling of PV panels really stagnated in the last year. And we went down to half of the sellings that we used to have. And this has a particular reason that we have net congestion in the Netherlands, which is also based on the fact that too many people are getting EV cars, too many people trying to feed in their solar power into the grid. And the grid, of course, that was designed for a centralized energy system. It was never designed for PV panels, heat pumps, and lots of renewable equipment that actually is there. We have very typical things in the Netherlands that actually hinder the energy transition. Nowadays, if you want to isolate your house, you have to do some research if there are no beds in your walls. That actually hinders house isolation. But if your house is not isolated enough, it doesn't make sense to take a heat pump. Yeah. So also fewer heat pumps were sold due to the lower subsidies. And the idea in the Netherlands was that we would try to become natural gas free till 2050, and we should manage to transit actually 150,000 existing buildings to natural gas free buildings, and we don't manage to that. So simple conclusion, yes, the Netherlands were always a success story, but it's slowing down after losing incentives. So the uptake of the renewable energy systems, the uptake of renewables, is it then not driven by sustainable motivations? Is it all driven by financial incentives? Are we dropping out because people were enthusiastic because they got their EV car, their heat pump, and the solar panels subsidized, that they could get a quick return on the investment in solar panels because through the netting system, etc.? Is this actually what is happening? Or no? Well, of course there are, and that's from the list above, there are also other barriers. The barriers that some of you might recognize from your own country, some might not recognize from their own countries. But everywhere, of course, in Europe, there are concerns about the grid infrastructure, because a lot of demand for electricity that's growing anywhere, and a lot of demand for renewable electricity, and the intermittent stage of energy generation gives us a lot of problem. But the grid infrastructure was never built for renewable energy. There's also discussions about environmental impact, when we used to be very enthusiastic about burning biomass, that we're getting other sentiments about that. There are new sentiments about solar parks, sentiments about windmills, discussions about energy security because of the Ukraine war, the position of Russia, the import of Russian gas, all discussions about investment risk and political changes and Trump and etc. So it's not just sustainable motivations versus financial incentives, but I would like to take you into some other barriers and problems. And like I already said, the best way to do this, maybe make it very practical, look at 3-4 examples and give you some of the barriers that are there in practice, and also bind this a little bit with this idea of communities, local communities, and people living and using energy together. And I take my examples from 2 projects. two horizon projects, Serene, that has local communities in the name, and also Sustenance, that has carbon neutral energy communities in this name, and also took a Dutch project to illustrate that. You see a lot of documents at the other side. We did a quick scan in the last week for something else, where we looked to do a lot of barriers that are actually already described on the European level, and amazingly how similar these barriers are. I don't have time to go into that, but we'll get back to that. Okay, so what we in general see, if we would look into this type of documents that sketch the barriers for the energy transition, everybody would know that would be economically, technical, regulatory, social, and behavioral barriers. So give a quick giveaway. What would be economic barriers? Of course, all this upfront costs of installing new energy systems. It's for industry, but it's also, of course, for consumers. You have to invest in solar panels first. You have to buy a heat pump first. You have to take risks. That you need to have the money for initial investments. And if there are no subsidies or financial incentives, of course, if there are no tax breaks and no feed-in initiatives, if the energy prices are fluctuating, investment risk gets bigger, of course, there are economic barriers. Everybody understands that. Of course, there are also technical barriers that we are all aware of. So integrating renewable energy sources is difficult. It is not only difficult because of the intermittency of renewables, but also have to do with a lot of problems that we're facing with standardization of technology and things like that. I get back to that in a moment. There are many regulatory barriers because also the regulatory system was actually defined and was actually designed for the old system of centralized fossil fuel energy markets. So it means then that there's a lot of misfits with this fossil fuel based regulation, and on the local level we're facing a lot of complex, lengthy and bureaucratic problems in permitting and things like that. And in the end, of course, and that's nice because we're on the local level, let's not forget about social and behavioral aspects. So I don't mean with behavioral aspects if people are investing. It's about also the social acceptance of technology, but also that we all need to change our behavior and that we all stuck to certain behavioral lock-ins, which are clearly shown in the way that people need to drive an electrical car in a different way, think about loading an electrical car in a different way than going to a gasoline station. Means also that if you work with a heat pump, you have to get used to different behavior in actually using renewables. Now, then I want to take you to some stuff that we done in the projects. I'm not going to go too much in depth into this, but just to make one argument. So we were able in some European countries, Poland, Denmark, and the Netherlands, to do a survey. We did it for our interest in some demo case populations, but we also looked to a bit of the wider municipal communities around the demo cases. We looked to the home countries. We also had some chance to look a little bit more European-wide. I don't have time to go into details, but what we were interested in, like this attitude of people towards innovation, particularly their willingness to pay to invest in renewable energy, and their motives to apply energy-saving behavior. So we wanted to get a kind of an idea, but also we tried to confront this a little bit with the idea of not, okay, this is what you are willing to pay, this is what people think and motivate, but also we try to learn a little bit more about social cohesions in communities and preference against ownership and levels of environmental awareness. I don't have time to go into that. I'm just picking out one element. And this element, of course, is very much related to my previous point about the Dutch situation. Because, like I said, what is actually then the crucial element? Is it the willingness to pay for people for renewable energy and renewable energy systems? Is that the real motivation? Or is it actually is it more sustainability motivation to do that? Now, what we came out in the project, and I'm a bit quick here, given the time, is that if we look at all the consumers that we found in a survey that are willing to invest in renewable energy, because they said that, and 64% of our respondents said they would be really interested. So this is a set of these consumers. So they have a favorable stance towards wanting to invest in renewable energy systems and renewable energy systems. And what we actually did with that, and the message I want to give here, let's not go into details, is that don't take all of the people that are willing to invest in renewable energy as one group. It's much more interested if we look to the uptake of renewables to realize ourselves that the group of people, even if they're willing to invest, they still have different backgrounds and different preferences. So some people are really driven by financial savings, and they don't want to put in more money, but other people do want to put in more money, but more money than the present level of investment. Some others depend very much on a more non-utilitarian values, and there are people that are also want to invest more and driven by the potential financial savings in the future. Now, it's not so much about this grouping as such, but keep the point that it's very important to not talk about citizens, energy consumers as general, but maybe probably for every country, think about it, there are different group of people that would also in the end need different incentives, different tax breaks, and different motivations to be willing and actually take action in the energy transition. So, okay, then I take a few chosen practical projects. Yeah. This is one project I taken as an example because this is a very interesting project. It's in not too far away from my university in the city of Almelo, and we built with a builder built here a project with 8 tenant houses. And what the builder actually wanted, they wanted to have real people living in a state-of-the-art house, because we're still in Europe often too much. Yeah, trying to make building projects where we put in very motivated people and then we make some conclusion about how it is to live in a state-of-the-art house. Yeah, and actually here there was a big interest by the building company, because the building company was actually specialized in inner city building projects, which means you often have to depend on existing grids. And then if you want to build a state-of-the-house energy house, then you would need heat pumps, you might need EV charging, which is not fitting to the existing grids. So the company had an interest in, can we make a system that would actually, with heat storage, with batteries, with PV panels on the roof, can we actually build a system, yeah, that would make it possible to build enough houses with not going over the capacity of the local energy system, because changing the grid is a lengthy process. Yeah. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the physical infrastructure, but you have to believe me, this is state of the art. We had storage of heat under the floor. We had heat pumps. We had solar panels, all managed by state of the art environmental management system. So that's it. Okay. Now the barriers. Now, one thing that's very important to tell you, if you make a system like this, if you are happy and glad, you would want to like to co-create it with people. Yeah. But often this is not possible because you have to build something first before the tenants or the people move in. Still, it needs to be a social technical design of a housing system. Always think about law, economics, and what you need from the inhabitants to actually make it a successful, sustainable project. Don't forget, these are technical innovations in a real life situation. People are living in a demo, but you don't want people to live in the demo. And we were very happy with this project, that people actually said in the end, they were very comfortably and very happy living in these houses. Of course, we also had DSO involved, but the project had to fit into Dutch rules, which means, for instance, and you probably are all aware about this in Europe, you cannot, as you're building if you're a landlord or you're building a project, you cannot simply deliver energy as a landlord to the people that are living in your building. And you cannot simply have energy sharing, because we have European rules like the free choice of energy supplier, we have free choice of contract types. You all have to take this kind of things into mind if you want to design a local energy system. that is a renewable system, which actually gives people a renewable energy system. But you have to think about how do you fit this within the existing rules. The project had a battery. Batteries will become a problem in Europe because exploding batteries makes people people are scared, a bit scared about that. And our project was not much of a problem, but we used a redox vanadium battery. It wasn't really a problem, but acceptance of new technology like batteries is part of a project like that. If you want to introduce renewables, you have to think about that. A big problem, of course, is what we call in economics the split incentive problems. Ownership and who actually pays. Split incentive means the problem that if you're the landlord of a house, do you want to invest a lot of money where actually the benefits go to the people that are actually the tenants of the house? And how do you actually going to organize that process without going to a price, renting price that people don't want to rent your house because you're becoming too expensive? Another interesting aspect of a project like this is, we should also not forget it, we need the inhabitants to actually support the technical innovations. Yeah, so they have to behave in a certain way to make the local energy system a successful system. So it means that you have communication and rules and incentives to actually steer the behavior in a way that it fits with the technical characteristics of a project like this. Of course, this is motivation, it is social norms, and if you can select your inhabitants, you actually have a little bit more control about it. But in this project, we were simply stuck with the people that rented it. So they were not specially motivated for climate. They just went there, they needed a house, and that actually happened. And one important thing, of course, that we learned in a project like that, let's not forget there are many layers of responsibility, and we were quite frustrated with knowledge and skills going around in the project with installation firms and things like that, but also for something I cannot address now too much, what we would call digital literacy. Don't expect people that are going to live in a state-of-the-art house that they understand what the system is, that they know which buttons to press. We have to think about how can you make a house like that in a way that people can enjoy renewable energy without making very difficult choices, have to look at 20 apps a day to actually be able to live there. Now I'm going to confront you with a mirror case of this project. This is Adenhuis, which is also part of our European projects. Adenhuis is a completely different project. It's been built around 12 years ago. There are 23, 24 kind of earthship houses. These people voluntarily came together, made a local community and said, we want to make real sustainable houses. And they also were very actively, they built a lot of the houses themselves, and they took in what at that moment was the state-of-the-art technology. They were super motivated in actually doing this because it was really their thing, yeah, to do this. So different than from the first case. In the first case, people were simply tenants and they say, yeah, whatever, if I pay a reasonable price and I get comfort, I'm happy with renewables, but I don't want to have cold showers. I don't want to have this. I don't want to have that. Here, people were much more motivated. That's very interesting. But what happened last year, January? Not this year, but last year, January. The houses, of course, had a lot of PV. And they blown up in January of all times. They blown up the transformer through too much PV overproduction. I didn't understand it. I would always think as a social scientist that the inverter would solve this problem, but actually they blown up the transformer. Actually, that shows that they have a very large supply production of renewables that they cannot use within the 23 houses, and they want to give this back to the grid, and they're actually so successful that this is part of the problem. Now let's look at the barriers. Now this is a little bit the mirror of the barriers with the other project. So yes, here also of course the social design of the whole housing system depended on law and economics and inhabitant behavior. But of course here inhabitant behavior was very positive. From the beginning to know we are prepared to do a lot of things actually to be able to live there. But still it's living in a real life situation. Everything that they're doing, they have to also live into that. Same problem as with the other house. They also have to have some rules about energy sharing. They had a little bit of exemptions in the rule, but in the end, they would get more money for putting their surplus of renewable energy on the grid through netting, but they also, from a sustainable perspective, are very much interested in self-consumption because they think that's more sustainable. They have a very high acceptance of new technology. They really care. Many people that build their own house, they really are interested to do this. And there's no incentive, split incentive problems, because they're the owners of the house. And the behavior should also here, of course, support technical innovation. But the goal of this project is being much more autarkic. They've seen the house as really like a kind of an hardship. They wanted to get rid of the influence of the big energy providers and big government, and their motivation and social norms, because they are self-selected, it's quite different. Okay, so this as a way to confront it. Now I have another case I want to show you. This one is at my university. It's called Slim Park. There's a company that is building this kind of things. You might have seen this already in Europe. You have a place where you park your cars, but you park your cars, you can park them under solar panels. And of course, we try to experiment a little bit with that at university. And now the nice thing, the university has its own grid. We're not really like, actually we have our own grid. Actually, we're the DSO for a part of the grid, but we are connected to the bigger grid. But still then, of course, EV loading is a problem. Because if all engineers come to the university and all buy an electrical car, we get problems. Yeah, because one EV car is like the electricity for several houses. So rules do not allow energy sharing, but acceptance of new technology in this academic environment of a technical university was not a big problem, because people, they all love apps. That's not a problem at all. So what actually happened is that it's not simply a way of charging your EV cars through solar panels, the use of a battery. It's also people charging their electrical car and making choices. What is the choice? The choice is, are you going to load your car in a way you get it as sustainable as possible, which means maximizing the use of the solar energy during the period that your car is being loaded? Are you financially motivated? Are you sustainably motivated? And people get an app with a lot of information, and then people can actually make the choice between how they want to load this. Here again, of course, this needs a social technical design. You need to have an organization, you need to take the rules into perspective, the economics, and also the behavior of and it also is in real life situation. And to be honest, during the experimental phase with this project, people were a bit more enthusiastic because loading for a while was for free. When they started paying, I heard some people say, well, yeah, don't load every day at the university anymore. I can better do it at home because then I don't have to pay anything. Okay, that's also, of course, is reality. Okay, my last case I want to say something about. My last case. Okay, this is another building project. And this is a bit of a combination between the first three projects I was talking about. I'm not going to go into details, but this project is from Poland. Yeah. And what we did there in the project, that we have 5 big apartment buildings. In one apartment building, we really started working on with which you can think about state-of-the-art renewable energy for the people. So PV installations, car chargers, heat pumps, energy storage. The transformer station was renovated, and particularly they wanted to get rid of glass flow heaters, which were still in the building. And the main reason they were in the building, very funny, is that actually if they would not have a glass flow heater in the summer, they would not have warm water, because there was indeed warm water present through the district heating system, but not in the summer. That's the old situation, but okay, so this was the system. So this is interesting because this is a completely different situation. Why? Because the people in this project, the project is built in the 1970s, and you might not immediately think, if you think about Poland, about this, but they are all house apartment owners in this building. Yeah. So we have 5 buildings. We focused on one building, 75 apartments. In the beginning, people were very skeptical, like, heat pumps are allowed, not for us, and EV on the roof is not an option, and we cannot pay if we don't want to do this. Now, during the project, we managed to get the first collective prosumer organization in Poland, which means that within the rules in Poland, the prosumers, that people are owners of part of the PV installation on the roof, and the profit are distributed over the participants as prosumers. Not everybody got into this project, would even be possible. 11 families decided to participate, which actually is a big success, and actually shows that even in a situation where people are quite skeptical, not very motivated for renewable energy, if you can show them what the benefits are, you can motivate quite some people. Were there barriers? Well, one of course was the grid, but the grid we invested in the transformer. Let's not talk about it. But what it actually also shows the project, it would be very difficult to work with apartment buildings like that and make it like a self-sustainable in energy sense. Always energy has to come from external sources, and storage helps, but then immediately you run into the problem that energy storage is just a small part of that, because the price for energy storage and batteries is so high. And also here in this project, interesting thing was rules. There were like rules for cultural heritage in this town, Sopot near Gdansk, that actually hindered the process. But also, it's an association of house owners, and some of you might be familiar with that. Association of house owners are often people that have to make a collective decision. They're like a community, and if many people vote against it, then it will simply not happen. They will not invest, they will not take their common money to invest in renewable alternatives for the energy in their building. Now, very last example, now really the last example, is take you to the other part of the world, India, because I want to give you a little bit of the other perspective for the discussion. So electrification in India, so let's not forget, we are happy in Europe, and some people from Africa are also online. They might be less happy with that. Nearly everywhere in Europe, we do have grids. Nearly everybody is actually connected to electricity, because let's not forget, there's still many places in the world where people do not have a grid connection. Why do people do not have a grid connection? Actually, we even had it in Europe, in some places in I think even Austria and the south of Germany and north of Italy, where it was simply too expensive to build a grid. And nobody wanted to build it, and then of course you have to find other ways. And what we did in the project is that we built a smart microgrid cluster with different sources of renewable energy for the houses. That was actually built on a small wind, on solar panels, and a very important point that I want to make with this project is this is a completely different situation. Yeah, because the idea, of course, that we have in the European Union is actually that we as citizens, we have money. We can actually contribute to the energy transition. We can take money off the bank, we can put solar panels on the roof, we can see this as an investment, there will be a return of investment in a number of years. But in a situation like a developing country, of course, people do not have money not to invest, and they only can pay a little bit of money for energy in the future. Of course, they did have energy, but the energy in the past was based on things like diesel or fossil fuel generators, and it was relatively expensive for them. And what is also interesting is that if you look to a place like that, two things. It's very important for the local economy. As soon if you give a village a lot of electricity, you will also see economic activities pop up that actually need, even in agriculture, would give them different sources of income. Yeah. So you are actually designing a social technical system. You need an organization around the energy supply, but it also will help you for your economic activities. And so they got an electrical rickshaw, for instance, that bring their food to the market, but they also have electricity, for instance, for cooling installations, which gives them more possibility to do something with their milk and agriculture products. There's much to say about, but also meant that a lot of equipment needed to be made for the specific local context to be able to take up renewables. It's not something that you can simply buy on the market. Even for something like an electrical rickshaw, they had to make an off-the-road electrical rickshaw that actually drives there in and around the village. Okay, now I'm towards the end of my time, so I'm be quick on my last slide. And I think this is all open, of course, for discussion. So I give you problems. I give you a lot of barriers. and I cannot give you a hard conclusion for how to stimulate the uptake of renewables within local communities. I just want to point you to the barriers that we have seen in the 4 cases. Yeah, and what is key if you think about it? What is key if you're a municipality, if you're a regional authority, if you're a group of citizens? What is key? One key thing is keep on thinking about social technical systems. Don't drop a local energy system on a neighborhood without involving or thinking about the consequences for the behavior of the inhabitants or the consequences for the people. Not in India and not in Europe. Yeah, which means that if you think about innovations, we should think more about what we call citizen-centered innovations. Yeah, and Günter said it at the beginning. The development of making better equipment is going very well, worthwhile, but it doesn't mean anything if it's not citizen-centered and people, for instance, have the possibilities to use it. Yeah, people need a certain form of digital literacy to be able to work with certain things, and you cannot expect people to work to live in a house and then have a panel where they have to push buttons if they're on launching a rocket in Cape Canaveral. It should be feasible for people. And what's also very important that we can learn is that it's the transition that we will have will never be going only from the perspective of individual citizens, individual consumers, although we are stuck a lot, of course, to the individual willingness to pay from people, even if they're doing collective action. But we do have to think in terms of collective actions between citizens to make things possible. And I don't have time to introduce the concept, but you probably heard a lot about it. We have to see it as a kind of energy commons. We have to see a neighborhood, the grid in the neighborhood, as something that we have to share and use together, as people used meadow commons in the past to put their cattle on. It's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of getting collective action. And we need collective action, not just for very motivated people like in the Adenhuis case. We need also to find a way to get people motivated in collective action in normal neighborhoods, very normal people that also will have a kind of a social norm how to behave. And last point is also, I said, this willingness to pay is a very crucial one. So yes, we can influence the willingness to pay of people by thinking a little bit differently. One, let's not forget, like I said, there are different categories of consumers. You always will find people that are prepared to pay. But if you want to use mechanisms like social norm setting, yeah, that you look like what your neighbor is doing and what you are doing, and you compensate each other, you need to have a community. There needs to be a social backbone to that. And we have to address the energy system knowledge and digital literacy. If people do not understand in which kind of system they are living, if people do not understand what they need to do, what is expected for their behavior, then the system will never work. But it's also, of course, it's related to the distribution of the benefits. Yeah, if people are living somewhere, they don't see benefits in their individual and collective action. They will also not. They will not support the energy transition. So in the end, it's also about creating favorable local energy system conditions and not leaving everything to the markets. At the moment, if you look to a lot of energy systems, if you look to what happened with standardization, if you look to, let's say, all the different forms of technology that we have, even if you look to the things that I was mentioning, particularly like EV charging, different EV charging systems, different cars, different heat pumps, they all have their own protocols, they all are very different, and it doesn't make it easier for us to think in terms of local energy systems. We had in a project a local energy system where we had 9 different types of heat pumps. You think about what that already means. And this is really necessary to actually do that. Okay, I'll stop here, Günter. And yeah, hopefully this gives some discussion, and Manuel definitely going to respond to this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Frans, for this in-depth insight into the results of your research. I really appreciated it and enjoyed it. As you mentioned, we do have technical problems and challenges.
Yeah.
We know this. Our grid was developed, and this also was analyzed by historians of technology, developed for a centralized system and for fossil fueled power stations, big fossil fuel power stations. This is the core of our grid, and this is very demanding to develop this further, just on the technical and economical path, so to speak. But I appreciate your analysis because you have a closer look to the people, to the consumers, to different types of consumers, which are not consumers anymore, as you mentioned. They are producers, they are prosumers. You know, in Styria, we do have about 20,000 power stations right now. All these PV installations produce electricity and makes our grid provider sweating on certain days. And that's the problem. We also do have that duck neck diagrams with the problem that at a certain time in summer, let's say at 12 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's almost no demand anymore for electricity by anybody. So this is really demanding. Thank you very much for your cases and for your in-depth insight and for the proposed types of people we have to do with. So now I would like to hand over the floor to Manuel Casquiço. He's the director of the Industry and Energy Transition Department of Adene. His background is computer science, which to me seems of utmost importance to handle these challenges we are facing, and business department, but he does also have a degree in civil engineering. In his first years of his career, he focused on this, but currently he's, as mentioned, the director of the Industry and Energy Transition Department, whose mission is to help consumers and promoters of renewable energy communities in the implementation of the projects of development of web platforms to help consumers on the energy transition. Manuel, it's your floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your kind presentation of my role here at Adene, the Portuguese Energy Agency. I will share my screen just to see if it's working. Please tell me when you are seeing. So I will try in the next, I think I have the 20 minutes, I don't know, 20, 15 minutes. I have to try to answer some of the questions that Frans also mentioned and try to discuss some of the things that we have here in Portugal. Renewable energy communities is taking a lot of attention in the last years here in Portugal. It's something that it's growing very well, and it's one of the, so it's not only PV panels, but also all types of renewable sources are very. It's a huge interest from the public, so it's very important for us. And also we are taking the path for electrification. So I will try to. I have here some technical aspects, but I will try to pass that slides. And if you have any queries or any questions about that, I can answer if you have some particularities of a specific aspect. So I will talk. Well, this is our role, just to explain that. So we in Portugal, we have different type of entities that have different roles. We don't have a role on the licensing process. Our role is basically dissemination and support. That's what we do. We also have a role on financing schemes to help consumers. So we have a lot of experiences with schemes to provide people with PV panels and other sources and also heat pumps. But our focus at the moment It's also supporting entities, supporting also local consumers, local entities, and the municipalities that have a specific role in this aspect on the uptake of renewable energy communities of self-consumption. I will try to, sorry, this is in Portuguese, but let me just say if everything is okay. So I don't know why this is in Portuguese, but basically this is the growing of solar PV in Europe. You can see, I'm just putting this just to explain that since 2020, this is like an exponential growth that we have here in Europe and also on the world. I have a specific slide after about that. So this is a huge challenge for the grids, as was mentioned before. We also here in Portugal, we have the same problem. So with the uptake of renewables, we also have congestions on the grid. And our grid also, it's not like the natural gas that we have. We have a natural gas grid that it's new, but we have an electric network that isn't, and the ones that also the distributed network is not so new. So we have also that problem. So it's the same with the world. This is also the installed capacity from 2000 to 2022. So we can see also the same pattern. That's what I want to highlight. It's this growth across the world and the uptake of also not only PVs but also in the different type of sources, as I will show you here in Portugal. This is the installed capacity of the centralized renewables here in Portugal. As you can see, we started with a small amount each year from 2020, and then from 2021 to 2025. So these are the most recent numbers. We also have 5 times the growth, so it's a huge growth. So and we have the target in our national plan to achieve in 2030 5.7 gigawatts. So we are at the moment in 2.69. So just for you to have an idea of the growth that we have here in Portugal. We are a small country, so but for us it's very important this that we are doing. This is the energy injected into the grid, in the distribution grid. This is on the 31 of March. So this is all types of renewable energy sources. This includes also the centralized and decentralized energy. But it's just to highlight that in our case, eolic, of course, there's still a lot of weight, on the majority of the weight in our mix on the distribution. So the solar, despite this growth, and we already have like 6 gigawatts of installed power of solar PV, the wind still has a large amount here in Portugal. And another aspect is the prices. We can see this is the first week of 2025. This is the prices on megawatts hour, and we can see that prices are decreasing on the this is the week of the 12th week of 2025, and I will show you the numbers of today. So these are the numbers of today. As we see, the price today is 22 euros per megawatt. So it's very, very, very low. And why it's very low? Because we have a lot of wind, we have a lot of hydro, and solar. As you can see, are the consumption plus storage. And we also have the natural gas. It's very small. So this is just to have an idea of our mix here in Portugal. But PV, it's growing, and also we have a different type of renewable energy communities, but we have some challenges, as Frans has said before. So this is just an overview of our self-consumption in Portugal, the number of dwellings that we have, and the buildings that we have. We already have 100% of smart meters installed here in Portugal, in our buildings. So what was in the end of the last year. And these are the number of installations of units for self-consumption. So this is what we call the UPACs here in Portugal. So these are the units for self-consumption, just to have an idea of the numbers that we have. So, and this is not, so it's been growing. The majority is for, of course, individual self-consumption. So not for collective self-consumption. So, and I have just legislation, just for you to have an idea. We'll not, of course, bother you with the legislation, but just to say that we started in 2019 with the first directive that was in 2018, or the main directive, one of the revisions, the first revision. And as we know, it's a huge challenge on all countries, because we have set a law in 2019, then in 2022 we have a revision of our electric system, and then a lot of amendments, and we still have a lot of amendments. So what I'm trying to explain here is that the regulation, and it's not easy for everyone, and most for the consumers, to be aware of these things, to be on the what we call to be on the more information, or on the edge of information. It's very difficult for local communities, for everyone in Portugal, to be aware of this. And one of the things, just to address what Frans said, we have a specific study made by our regulator about energy literacy here in Portugal. And just for you to know, when we talk about here in Portugal, the index that we have from 0 to 100, or 1 to 100, it's below 50% or so. What we are saying is it's more than 50% of the Portuguese are still above the threshold, or don't know much about energy. So this is a problem to explain to these people, to all the people, how this works. So it's very difficult, and it takes a lot of effort for companies, also for municipalities, and also for us to explain how this works and the added values of the energy communities. So we also have what the renewable energy community and citizen communities for energy, that we don't have that here in Portugal. So the majority of people or makes the renewable energy community, or makes what we call the collective self-consumption. It's basically the same. So I will not just I will not read all of this, of course, just to explain that we have what we call the renewable energy communities and the collective self-consumption. The only difference, and I have a slide with that, it's that on the renewable energy community, you have to make a legal entity, as Frans said. So we need to have a legal entity. And when we're talking about the collective self-consumption, you don't need it. That's why the majority of projects, like 99% of the projects, are what we call the collective self-consumption projects. Okay, it's basically the same as a renewable energy communities, but without this legal entity, that we consider that it's more for example, for municipalities, or also for companies that want to develop something about this. So they have this ability. It's the same. They can produce, consume, store, and buy and sell renewable energy and share. We already have that here in Portugal. Something that it's going quite well. We also have what we call the aggregators here. So it's basically the retailers that can, of course, sell the surplus of energy from the consumers. I was saying about collective self-consumption, it's a little bit different of renewable energy communities, but basically it's the same. So when we have more than 2 or more than units of utilization, what we call the buildings or other type of industrial services. So basically, with more than one, it's what we call the collective self-consumption. It's a little bit more easy, the licensing process. Basically, it's this. So we have what we call the unity of production. Then we have what we call these different unities, and of course the connection to the grid. So basically, it's more than 2, and then it's okay. Basically, also the same company can have more than 2 installations. It's also a collective self-consumption. So for the legislation. Okay. So just one of the particularities we in Portugal. So for you to make a collective self-consumption, we need what we call a self-consumption management entity. This management entity can be a commercial entity and an enterprise, or also can be, for example, a person or someone from the condominium, or also for the community. It's not a problem. So, but basically, they are the ones that make the connection with the grid operator, and also with the municipality. So this is one of the added values. This is how it works. So basically, we have what we call the legal constitution of the renewable energy community. It's what I said before. So basically, they have to be constituted legally. They need to have like a fiscal number. Then they have to develop the project and internal regulations, make the registration. They have to make an approval on the National Directorate for Energy. They can make the execution. They also have to have the approval of the installation in operation, installation management, metering, sharing coefficients, and the invoice. So it's very difficult, of course, for someone that it's not entirely, that knows all this process, or the electricity or natural gas markets, to make all this process. That's why they need a management entity that helps them to make all these processes in the majority of the cases. So This is just for you to have an idea. So basically, if you have below 700 watts, you can install everything. So you don't have to communicate. If you have from 700 to 30 kilowatts, you have to make like what we call a prior communication. And if you have this every time you increase the power, of course you are adding complexity on the process. So this is just on the moment. Basically, you make the registration and then you can do it. When it's built above 30 kilowatts, the process starts to taking a lot of time to have the licensing process. And of course, it's more than 1 megawatt. The process takes even more time, just for you to have an idea. One of the interesting things here that we have here in Portugal, it's the proximity. In the first legislation in 2019, we didn't have this definition of proximity. So, but basically it's that for low voltage, we have 2 kilometers from the production unit until the consumption unit. And then we have medium voltage and high voltage and very high voltage. You have these values. In the first version of our process, you needed to be on the same substation. Now you don't need to have to be on the same substation. So we are also revising the legislation in a very frequent basis. So that's why I said it's not easy for everyone to. It's just an aspect. So if you have what we call the internal grid, you don't pay what we call the network access fees, and you have to access the public service electricity grid. You need to pay the network access fee. So it's an increased cost that you have. We also need specific entities to install the UPAC, so it's not everyone that can install it. So you have specific entities that need to install. They are recognized for this purpose by the National Directorate for Energy. But this is something that I think it's going relatively well here in Portugal. This is the rights and duties of the self-consumer. I will not give you here this in detail, but it's just to explain that, well, they have to dimension. This is one of the key things here in Portugal. When you are making the project of your unit of production of renewable energy, you have to make the dimension accordingly to your consumption. You cannot put it more that is your consumption in the majority of the cases. So it's something that you must be aware because of the surplus. When the surplus of energy is very high, in the majority of the cases, it's not approved by the National Directorate for Energy. So that's one of the key things here. This is the metering, as I said before. We have 100% already of the metering here in Portugal, and it's mandatory, of course, to participate on the energy communities or in the collective self-consumption. So we also have this internal regulation that have the requirements for new members. This is also one of the key things that we need to have here. How they enter in the municipality, in the community, how they leave the community, the different type of coefficients I also have here, but I will explain the payment of the access to the grid, the surplus management, also the maintenance. So we also have these models. I have that in the end, and you can access our website if you want to look at our documents that we have made it. So, and if you have any doubts, you can talk to us. But also with the new tools of iTools, you also can translate the documents if you think it can be helpful, and contact us. So we also have what we call the sharing coefficients. I will just explain that we have what we call 4 types of coefficients: the fixed, the consumption, what we call hierarchical, and dynamics. I will not explain here in details, but it's just to explain that also this increases the detail. The majority of people don't know how to do it. So that's why the companies need technical help for this. This is one of the key things here. If you don't have the knowledge about this, it's very difficult to, of course, to do all of this alone. So this is almost impossible, I might say. So I will not just explain. You have the slides. I can share the slides after, and you can see the details and also the sharing. I will explain. So what are the advantages of collective self-consumption? This is one of the key things that we explain for consumers and when we make public conferences. So this is, of course, the sharing energy with other members. So, and also with the energy poverty. When we are talking energy poverty, it's not easy. In the majority of the cases, the involvement of these citizens is only on for example, decreasing their energy invoice. Basically, it's that, because if we are increasing more complexity of, for example, the maintenance of solar panels, this type of things, it simply doesn't work. So what we have to do is they can participate in some cases based on the municipalities. In the majority of the cases, it's with the participants, with the participation of the municipalities. And that in that cases, we also have here, for example, in Casquiço, that example, that, for example, you have the solar panels in a school, and then when we have surplus, they give the surplus for some of the consumers. In that case, it works. So this is the reduction on electricity bill. Of course, this is a huge interval, but it depends, of course, on the type of installation. This is one of the key things. This is the remuneration for sharing energy. At the moment, the prices ranges from what we call 4 cents per kilo, 4 cents of an euro for kilowatt, until 8 cents of an euro per kilowatt hour. This is the prices that it's being made on the market for the aggregators that sell the surplus. Okay, they buy within that price, and the average price that we pay here for the electricity, it's almost 20 cents of the euro that we pay for the kilowatt hour that we pay here in Portugal. So it's below average. It's like about 40% or until 80%. It's not 80. It's 20%, 30% of the value. And then we also explain of the social and environmental concerns that, of course, it's very important. So this is the majority of installations I just put here. This is, of course, this is one of the key things because of the social acceptance that we have, and also Frans talked about these things. Here in Portugal, the social acceptance when of the local communities, when they see this type of panels installed on the ground, it's not very, it's not high. So the majority of people don't like to see the panels installed on the ground. So they are almost at the moment criticizing these huge power plants that we have here, solar power plants. They don't like it to see on the ground. So that's one of the key things that for the companies and also for everyone to be aware, is to install it on the roof. I have here some examples. This is the Telheiras energy communities. It's one of the first. So basically, it's the partnership of Telheiras and what we call the parish council of Lumiar. Also have the technical support from Copernic and the Nova. It's a university here in Lisbon. And also, as you can see, it's a very small installation. It have only 7 kilowatt hours. So in power kilowatts of power. Basically, it's for 16 families. And 3 of these families are in energy poverty, and they are already planning the second one for 60 new members. As you can see, this is the photo of the image of this one. It's very small, but they share it already. And this was one of the first ones. And this one was the first, what we call the pilot project. This is in Porto. It's in Amial. This is already have 180 dwellings and 2 schools. So this is a major one. Already have more than 100 kilowatts of power installed. And also in residential buildings, you can see it here on the top. And also in the school. They also have storage. They have batteries. They have storage. Also Second Life storage. And they also have 6 electric vehicle charging points. So this is one is already going, and it's quite successful. This is what we call a social neighborhood, so social housing. And this was the first pilot project here in Portugal. It started in 2022, but only finished it in 2024, the licensing process. So it takes a lot of time. And this is examples of other services, as I see. So we have electric mobility. So this is one of the added values of the renewable energy communities, and also the collective self-consumption. It's also the possibility to share, have electric mobility, share the surplus, and also, for example, do other things if they want, mainly on renewable energy communities. And just to say about municipalities, it's being very difficult here in Portugal to have the municipalities participating in renewable energy communities because of the public procurement. It's one of the key things here in Portugal. the majority of the municipalities, what they are doing at the moment in order to participate or to facilitate the process, it's basically this what you see in this photo. Basically, they are renting a space in the municipality, and then they make like a tender for a company to basically manage and to sell the places in every place, and for example to explore, and also to use and to explore the renewable energy community. So it's one of the key things. It's very difficult to have the municipality participate. Just to have to explain that we have also a very key thing in the financing. We have the approval of 6% of VAT for solar equipment for PV panels since 2023. So it's a very huge thing here in Portugal. And we also have specific schemes for the financing of these aspects. So this is what how my final slides. It's say, as we know, it's very difficult for companies to have this information to know all this information. We have specific guides that you can access here, and if you want to have this information, you can access by this QR code and go to our website to have more information. So basically, this is the guide. I'm just finishing self-consumption for how to fill in all the information on the online platform, and also to ask budgets for the consumers. And basically it's that. So and I'm able to, of course, to discuss and answer questions if you want specific details. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Manuel, for sharing these in-depth analysis of the Portuguese case, which is, as we know, one of the most successful within Europe. So it's quite famous already what you have achieved in Portugal. Congratulations. And thank you also for informing us about the role of this intermediate organization, Adene, which is also a key for success in Portugal. Now I would like to suggest to open the floor to everybody. But first, I would like to hand over the floor to Frans, so that he gives us maybe some comments from his perspective, with his background, on what we were able to listen now with Manuel. Maybe just a few minutes, Frans, from your perspective, and then I open the floor to the whole of the audience.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Günter. Two remarks. To start with the reaction on Manuel. I had the honor to work with this local energy community you mentioned, Copenica, quite early, 2017 to 2018, when they were like really pioneering in Portugal. And like I said in my presentation, let's not underestimate how important the social community aspect is. In one of your slides, you talked about energy reduction. In the RESCO Plus project, we had energy communities all over Europe, and they all tried to let their members save energy. And what the European Committee wanted to know, actually, in the call in the project, was if they would be more successful. And actually, they were. So energy communities were more successful in engaging their members in energy saving than normal energy providers, simply because this idea of social capital and this idea of social norm and this idea of, so that's also a very important aspect of that. And I'm actually, when I see when they were in 2017 and see how big everything grown in Portugal, it's actually, I should not mention the Netherlands as a success story. I think Portugal should be the success story. That's one. Secondly, I wanted to make a small remark about what Günter said about the net congestion. So net congestion is okay. I need a small story about it. So there's a rural community not too far away from me. And these people, they're really rural community. They have barbecue in the summer. They do something together with Christmas. Now, the problem is they have a very old grid, yeah, a rural grid. And the problem with that grid is it will not be strengthened or replaced in the next 30, 40, 50 years because they will not get any priority. the grid companies. That will take some time. Now, what is going to happen there? What did the people see? If the persons that are at the beginning of the grid, somebody started buying 2 EV cars, put in a lot of solar, and other people doing that, then of course you run the risk that the people that are in the beginning of the grid, they will feed in, take from the net without their renewable energy. The people that are at the end of the grid, they will get the blackouts. Imagine that. The people will not have any barbecues anymore, no Christmas dinners. Everybody will be fighting because actually a grid is a kind of a common that you also have to share. And we, of course, are very used to, like, yeah, the government will provide it. But expanding the grid everywhere in Europe is such an expensive project. And of course, Manuel was talking a little bit also about that you, of course, if you have solar parks, that's where you have to find, you have to go to not a low level grid, but a medium grid, or maybe even a high voltage grid. Of course, that's a different situation. There's also a different situation where you actually have the net congestion, but it is. And like I showed with Adenhuis, having a community with 23 houses, all producing PV, a maximum, they've blown up the transformer. And if everybody would do that in the Netherlands, we would be blowing up the transformers everywhere. Of course, that's not the idea. So we all have an interest in people coming together, thinking about this, seeing the grid as something that is also where we also have the capacity together, and not just in villages or communities. Also, what is happening a lot over Europe now is industrial areas. All industries need more electricity. You talk about electrification of the industry, but also they have an older grid, and it's also not very easy to quickly replace the grid everywhere. Yeah, so we see energy hubs on industries that are rethinking as a kind of commune together. How can we use the capacity of our grid together? How can we share energy? How can we do it that we as a community do not give each other the blackouts? So that's just a remark I wanted to make.
Thank you so much, Frans. Well, yeah, and now I'm looking for raised hands. The floor is yours to the audience. Who would like to ask a nice question or give a comment on what we have heard from Manuel or Frans? So up to now, I don't see any hand up. Let's wait a while. Who dares to be the first one? So, if nobody dares, it's me, of course. With regard to regulation, it's a question to both of you, because this is a highly regulated sphere we are talking about. Electricity, as you may know, is a natural monopoly somehow. The grid, electricity grid is a natural monopoly. So, and that means the state always, or the European Union always plays a key role in this regard. Could you try to have a look into the next 5 to 10 years, how regulation will develop with regard to the grid and to the prices consumers have to pay for electricity? Because, as you may remember, in August 22, at least in Austria, but it was more or less the same in all nations in Europe, we had something like a price shock. The prices went up from, I think, Manuel, you mentioned it, 22 or 30 euros per megawatt hour, up to 500, 800,000 euros per megawatt hour within minutes. So what's your opinion? Trying a little bit to look into the future.
Thank you very much, Günter, for your question. Well, it's something that it's not easy to predict in 5 to 10 years, because we know what happened in 2022 and 2020 that changed all the prices, and we have a lot of problems, of course. For example, with 2022, the prices of electricity and also gas went high, and electricity not so much. So, what do I think? So, with the need to have developments and increase on the capacity of the grids, this is one of the things that is being discussed here in Portugal. So when you need to make, of course, new investments on the national grid, as we need to do, of course, that cost will be supported, of course, by the consumers, the end consumers, and that will be reflected on the prices that we pay. And in that case, I think we have, of course, an increase of the prices on that purpose. Then another key thing that I want to reflect, it's the prices that we pay because of the grid access. Let me just explain that when we started this regulation in 2022, the prices of the grid access fee were negative, were below zero. The majority of people don't have what we call indexed tariffs that varies with the day, with the prices that, for example, that I show. And at the moment, we are paying, so that's the increase in the price. We are paying 6 cents per kilowatt hour just for the access of the grid per kilowatt hour. So since the start of this regulation, passed from negative values, from like 3 cents negative that they were putting on the, so of some families paid zero. I can say that I in the first invoice that I had, I paid €1 on my invoice, for example, for 700 kilowatt hours per month or more. So what I said is that you already have an increase on 10 cents per kilowatt. So it's like the double of the price. It's that what I predict for the next years. If it's something that it maintains, if the market maintains like this. When we are talking about an increase of these renewable energy communities, and we have a majority of adoption of, for example, the PV panels or other solution, I think that's the way how people will lower the energy bills. That's the only way. So I think the grid tariff with the investments will increase, and then people will of course look for solutions to pay less, and that solutions can be renewable energy communities, or, for example, individual self-consumption. And I think that model can be one of the models that we have here in Portugal. Okay, that's my opinion.
It's attractive. Frans, what would you say? Manuel said his idea is that the prices, if I understood you right, will go up because of investment into the grid. But there are options of resilience because of microgrids, because of self-sustainable or sustaining networks, smaller networks in communities. So there is hope. But in principle, prices will go up because the grid becomes more expensive, will be more expensive. It will be bi-directional. There will be more complicated transformers within the grid, which are able to work with these constantly changing flows of electricity. So I think this is a prediction we all could sign. But what's your opinion, Frans?
Yeah, I see a hand raised, but some remarks about this. So, okay, One is, of course, the difficulty with renewable energy and the growth of renewable energy. Let's not forget about that we still would need a base load on the grid, yeah, in some form. So I don't know, probably are Germans on here. They know Germany is phasing out nuclear energy. The Netherlands, for instance, and some other countries actually revived nuclear energy also from the perspective of that we need a base load. And we need to get it from somewhere, because in the end, renewable energy is also a bit unpredictable. What happens in the Netherlands now is, apart from the normal raise, of course, of the cost of the grid that will be transformed in taxes for the people, because we have to spend billions on improving the grid. Yeah, is that also many energy providers now tax an extra tax for people that have a PV panel on the roof, because we're feeding in. We're coming from the Netherlands comes from a very favorable situation where having solar panels was very positive. You would feed in, you would actually get a lot of money back. I'm not going to explain the system in detail, to a system where you actually now have to pay more to actually be doing that. And we're facing a number of problems, because we might look at all our curves and the duck curves or whatever like that. But what we also are seeing, of course, at the moment, it's not simply that people are loading their EV cars at the same moment. Yeah, it's also that we have installed a lot of equipment that also might be using electricity from the grid at the same moment, because they're all start the heat pump, they all start things because the price is low or negative. So that also will influence, of course, the whole markets. So, and my fear is that that if you have a system with only renewables and very little base load, whatever you do with the grid, we still have to find another solution, unless we can all keep on importing a lot of hydropower from Norway, or and what the Germans are doing now, importing actually the nuclear energy from France that they actually don't want to have yourself. So that's an interesting interesting perspective. On the other hand, that's my last remark. Let's not forget that what we had in the discussion is we're spending an awful lot of money on improving the grid for sometimes very small periods of peaks. Yeah. So peak shaving, which often peak shaving is also behavioral things by people. Behavioral can be, we are in a community, we're in a village. The grid is weak. Don't load your PV at a certain moment. We know this principle from islands when they don't have a grid connection with the land, and people can actually get an app. Don't put in your washing machine at the moment we're low on energy. That's actually also where we actually might go a little bit to. We already have developed technical tools in the Netherlands where we can actually stop people loading too much on the grid. It's all possible. So maybe we should take out some of the peaks in a different way, either by behavior or by taxes, as some countries do, or with technical means. So because the higher the peaks, the more we have to actually do. And so we might survive for a while by actually a bit more peak shaving on the level of the low voltage grid. I don't know if that, okay, but some people might have more ideas about that. Yeah.
I think this will be the art of the future, to find the equilibrium between investing in the grid and to tap other instruments and measures. So there is Julia and then Katja. Julia, your turn.
Hello. I have a question regarding regulation. Do you see any possible changes in the regulation from social perspective, that every person can choose the energy provider? Because it's a huge obstacle in implementing renewables currently. And also at the university, we were discussing that in Carinthia, there is a lot of households who are trying to implement some renewables, such as install solar panels, but then the households just votes against. And because of this legislation, basically, they are not able to implement such initiatives. And I'm not from EU, and in my country, like, we don't have this rule, and there were never complaints. So how do you see, is it expected that this freedom of energy supplier will be just changed to less of options, so people could not vote against?
Should I say something?
Yes, please, Frans.
Yeah, I'm not an expert here, but of course, this choosing the free provider of energy has to do, of course, with the energy market liberalization that goes back to 2016, and I think that's a backbone of that. So, and the whole uncoupling, of course, in the system. So, yeah, I mean, maybe there's some experts here that know better, but I think, yeah, if you would force the people to take a certain provider, then that would go against the EU rule. And just a remark is that the problem that you're sketching is not just it's in all of the projects. Like if you would have a great project, if people all can keep on choosing their own energy provider, you cannot organize something within the project unless you are in a situation behind the meter and your national regulation actually affords that. So maybe other people have a good idea about it, but I think it will not be easy to take away the liberalization rules in Europe and go back to another situation.
Thank you.
Sorry, just but of course, if someone wants to take the floor, yeah, I just want to say, well, we have the since 2006, so it started here with the electricity open market. So we have more than 20 suppliers of electricity, and we also have like 12 suppliers of natural gas that everybody can change here in the continent. So, but in the islands, we still have what we call the regulators. So, and it's a regulated market in the Açores and in Madeira. Just to explain that it was also not easy here in Portugal when we started what we call the unbundling of these systems, and we have the transportation, we have the distribution, and we have, of course, the suppliers, the end suppliers. That's how we are divided here in Portugal. So the electricity started in 2006, and the gas started in 2009. And at the moment, it goes quite well. If you can see this link that I think you already have here in the chat, it's also one of the simulators that we have provided. So if you want if you can go to that link, it's in Portuguese, but you can try to change it for English. You can see how it works here in Portugal. So we have all the information there in the link. We also have, and then you can also change by our website. For example, all the Portuguese people can go to our website and make the change specifically on our website. And in 5 days, they already changed the supplier. Just to say that, okay, if you want to see the information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuel. Katja, your turn.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Thank you for this interesting presentations. I'm a social psychologist and also working, doing research in the energy sector. And so I'm very interested going back to this initial question. So now we heard that energy communities might be a challenge for the grid, but we still want to get more energy communities. We want to motivate more people to join or initiate energy communities. So I'm interested, Frans and Manuel, what you think. We heard that it's very complicated to do that, and it's a lot to ask from lay people and citizens to engage or initiate an energy community. So they need some advice and expertise from maybe somebody else. And in our research, we actually saw that the municipality would be an entity that could provide this expertise as a guiding. But now, Manuel, you said that in Portugal, the municipalities are maybe hesitant to do that, if I understood you correctly. And I think an alternative would be to have enterprises or companies who maybe offer the services to do that. But we also see that some citizens are a little bit maybe skeptical to trust such companies. So I'm wondering what you think. That would be my first question. Yet, who could be this guiding entity if you think about municipalities and companies? And another question I want to ask is, if the community is so important, I'm always wondering, and maybe you just can give me your hunch about that. Would it be more successful to take an existing community and trying to motivate them to do also energy sufficient behavior or initiative, or do we search for people once we want to have an energy community and seek out the people to build this new community? So which way to go? These are my two questions. Thank you.
You want me to answer? Thank you very much, Katja, for your questions. And so, as I said, why it's difficult and the role of the municipalities. So as I said, the municipalities are very we have different types of literacy, of course, and different types of capacity, of technical capacity of the municipalities here in Portugal. So you have the major ones, for example, Lisbon and Porto, as I said, that have a huge capacity and also have like local energy agencies that can help and can promote this type of things at a local level. But when you go to interior and some of the other municipalities, it's very difficult. Just for you to know, we have had a meeting in the center of Portugal, in a small community, and the only way the company it was promoted by someone that lived in that it's not a municipality, it's a lower level, but it was someone that came from the United States. It was a Portuguese, so of course it have studies, and so he came to Portugal and tried to promote a energy community in this place near Coimbra. It's in the center of Portugal, and the only way, so it was a effective way to have to talk with all the inhabitants of this local, was in the church. So people went to church during the morning, and he asked the priest to talk to all the people to be there in the afternoon. So we went to the church, and then we talked to everyone to explain how it works. So that's how to use how do you see, for you to see to what is the different stages in some of the places. And they are trying to implement this still they are still trying to implement. What I'm saying is that the municipalities have a lot of difficulty to participate on this because of the public procurement rules here in Portugal. That's why. So what they do, it's in the majority of the cases, as I said before, they held this type of actions for us to explain to people how it works. And then in majority of the cases, it's the companies, the private companies in Portugal that start to promote in the first stage what we call the individual self-consumption, and then they start growing up for self-consumption and also for energy communities. So in the majority of the cases, or you have someone that it's an expert on this matter of has a lot of knowledge, or in the majority of the cases are the private entities that goes and promote in that level this type of communities. Also, not only companies from the energy area, but from other areas. They talk to companies, and then these companies goes there and they start to go and build also with this social aspect of the things. That's how it's going. It's working here in Portugal. Okay. I don't know if you want.
Can I have a quick reaction, Günter, from the Dutch side, or? Yeah, just very short. So yeah, I did the Portuguese model, but the Dutch model is so yes, municipalities and provinces are a little bit more enthusiastic, and they are setting up help desks. There are intermediate organizations like environmental NGOs that intervened, but there's one very important one that's really growing very quickly. These are experienced local energy communities helping new starters. That's a very interesting one. So we keep that. Now I forgot the second question, Günter. There was second question.
Well, I ask if it should be more like that there's a community which is maybe not energy related, and you tap into that, or you create the energy community.
Indeed, because we're one of the conclusions that we had in the project is that, and yes, you've seen in the presentation, like we have a lot of organizations. Like in the Sopot case I presented, in the Polish case, it's a house owners association. So they actually get an extra task, which is energy, which is very logical. So you're very right. We see, and from the moment first we also have a project with farmers. We see that existing organizations that pick up as an extra goal energy, and actually that's not strange for anybody that has like a cooperative function like house owners associations or farmer corporations. It's a very good idea to actually start there, because you already have the community, but it doesn't solve the problem of expertise. You still need somebody to help you on the way a little bit, but at least you, like you say, you have at least the social capital side, you have at least, or that as a social side you at least have covered. Yeah. Günter, you muted.
Yes, I am. Sorry for this. Giovanna, it's your turn.
Hi, hello. Well, thank you very much for the presentations. I wanted to build up a bit on this comment you had regarding the energy monopoly and the necessity to pay for the connection to the grid hourly. And basically, excuse my ignorance, but I remember in the beginning of the whole PV context, they were usually seen in off-grid housing. And I wanted to know the relation of the policy. I know that in Austria it's quite hard to have new construction in an area that you have access to infrastructure and still go for off-grid construction. And the relation to the grid, like, couldn't I simply decide on not bringing it back to the grid? I'm not really aware of how this mandatory connection happens or not mandatory. It's more like a confusion rather than a direct question.
I can try to explain. So, well, here in Portugal, when you are making a renewable energy community, and if you want to share your energy, so or you live in a condominium or in a place that it's closed and you can make a closed network. But in majority of the cases, the investment on the grids are made by the municipalities. For example, you have a new neighborhood or you have a new place. In majority of the cases, the grids are supplied by the municipality. And of course, if you have the building or one single family house, of course you have to do all the things from the meter to inside. So if you want to share energy here in Portugal, you have what you call the monopoly. So we have 11 distributors here in Portugal. We have one that have 99% of the country, and then we have 10 small ones. But in the majority of the cases, you need to have a smart meter. So, and then for you to have a smart meter, you have to be connected to the grid. And that's why the majority of people are connected to the grid, because they have the opportunity. If they want to sell the surplus, you need to be connected to the grid. For example, if you produce more than you need, you want to sell that part, you need to sell it to the grid, or you can have storage, of course. If you want to have storage, you don't need it. But that's what I was saying. In the Portugal level, all with some small exceptions, majority of people need to have the connection to the grid for this purpose, and of course to manage. It's very difficult when you make this type of installations to have 100% of renewable energy, of electricity from renewable energy. So, and that's why we have that here in Portugal. I don't know, Frans, if you want to.
Thank you.
Yeah, my interpretation of the question is a little bit like this principle of autarky. So, which is very interesting. If you look in the movement of local energy communities, the first ones were actually wanted to, like I said, in Adene, they wanted to have as less connection to energy providers and governments as possible, because they wanted to be autarkic. They wanted to be like an energy island. And in the other case I was showing of India, actually these people are also autarkic. They don't get energy from outside in the system unless the truck brings them fossil fuels. But this is involuntary. It's like an island where you don't have electricity because you do not have a connection to the mainland. So that's another situation. But we are all a little bit addicted to the situation that the most cheapest form to do a local energy system is use the grid as a big battery. That's actually what we're doing. We're using the grid as a big battery. We want to put the renewable energy on the grid if we have too much, and we want to have a place where we actually get it out if we don't have it. And we're not prepared to say, okay, we accept we don't have energy at certain moments of the day because we're in an island, we don't have a connection, we don't have sun. That's so we're all a little bit, I think, addicted to that fact. So either you have storage and you do it like that, but there are places, of course, in the world there's no other solution than being energy autarkic, because there's simply no energy coming from outside of the system, in particular not if you want to have it renewable. That's true. It's a very interesting concept to think about it, but I do not know many people that actually would go so far of actually not accepting that and not doing it, and accepting actually that at certain moments of the day you would not have electricity. But that would be interesting. Yeah.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you. So looking at the time, I have to ring the bell. Thank you very, very much, Frans and Manuel, for your beautiful contributions. They are really, yeah, almost breathtaking, because they show us that, of course, energy communities will be a part of the solution. But it will depend very much on the member states of the European Union, if there is a proper and fitting legal framework for these energy communities. And this depends very much on the cultural, let's say cultural background within these energy communities will be or should be embedded. So there is much development to be done so that they are these energy communities can develop well and can be part of a bigger part of the solution. I'm quite convinced. Thank you very much for your contributions. Thank you for being with us. I hand over the floor to Brigitte.
Thank you very much, Günter. Thanks to all the participants, also for the questions, to the speakers for their nice presentations. This is just to remind you that this is a series of lectures and it's going to go on. So on the 14th lecture is going to happen on the 12th of June. And this is about science diplomacy and the geopolitics of science. I strongly recommend all participation in this really nice event. Thanks very much for bearing with us, and thanks especially to my colleague Zina Meshbri, who set this up so nicely tonight. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Günter, for doing the chairman. Thanks very much for everyone. Thank you. Have a nice evening.